Welcome back. Now, according to the South African Cultural Observatory, the creative economy is one of South Africa's most underappreciated economic drivers, keeping thousands in jobs and contributing almost 3% to the GDP. To highlight this, SACO Chief Research Strategist and Cultural Economist Professor Jen Snowball has established a monitoring and evaluation framework for measuring the value of publicly funded arts, culture and heritage programs. Now, the framework can assist various performing artists, art managers, researchers and many more to identify, present and measure their value. To tell us more, we are joined from our Port Elizabeth studio by South African Cultural Observatory Chief Executive Officer, Professor Richard Haines. Professor, thank you very much for joining me. And maybe just to put our viewers on the button here, what is the South African Cultural Observatory and what are the objectives of the organizations? And I did say a mouthful in the intro.
Okay. Sam, the South African Cultural Observatory is in effect the highest research arm of the Department of Arts and Culture, national. It actually undertakes a range of research focusing on cultural information. Also, it looks at mapping and analyzing and understanding the dynamics and trends in the creative economy. It also looks at providing means of understanding the impact, the economic impact, and more broadly the socio-economic impact of public and private sector investment in the creative economy. And that's where Professor Snowball's monitoring and evaluation framework is so useful, because it actually focuses on the understanding the impact of spending on events and festivals and creative enterprises. But more extensively, the observatory aims to provide Department of Arts and Culture and also to contribute nationally to government understanding more generally of how the creative economy and more specifically the cultural and creative industries are functioning and ways in which we can retain, sustain and expand their value for South Africa.
Professor, many people will argue, and I tend to agree, that it is critical that we finally have a framework, a process of monitoring, because I think for many years we might have had this debate quite anecdotally. Talk to me about that framework and that process of monitoring and the evaluation. And then at the end of that, how does government then use that information?
Well, basically, the framework has been supplied by Professor Snowball. It's been set up, and it provides a range of themes and indicators, so we can look at the range of foci that or thematic material that will allow one to better understand how a particular festival or enterprise look at their economic and more broadly their social impact. So that's actually very useful for government. It allows them to understand how their spending, how public spending is actually impacting on the economy. And also this particular framework that Professor Snowball has introduced and is available for enterprises, for creatives to utilize. And we've been also undertaking training courses along this particular line. So it allows them to do their own, to help estimate their own impact. It also allows them, by doing that, it allows them when they're doing business plans to plan or to strengthen bids for future state funding.
Professor, we're going to leave it there. We've run out of time. It's a very interesting discussion, and I think we've got to pick it up at some point again. That's the South African Cultural Observatory Chief Executive Officer, Professor Richard Haines. There's also an upcoming Cultural Observatory National Conference that will happen in May, and maybe we'll tap into that.